Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our second week, our journey, our second week of our 7 week journey into the chakra system. Um, we began last week with Muladhara. Muladhara, as we know, is our grounding chakra, the one at the base of our sacrum, and the one that really creates this foundation that we basically base our life on. And we talked a little bit about kind of grounding and how that kind of shapes our daily life. It has shaped maybe things in our lives and how we react to things. Svadhisthana is the second chakra, and it is the sacral chakra. It is centered in the pelvic region, and near this in the sacrum area, so down below. It is often related to sexuality and to reproduction. And it's also related to a sense of feelings, being connected with our feelings and having the right to feel. It is, in the Sanskrit word, Svadhisthana stands for one's own place in this world. The color that's often associated with Svadhisthana is orange. As you know, we've got the rainbow of colors along the chakra system, and each one represents a different color. The color of Svadhisthana is orange. It is related to the element of water. It is a very flowy. So unlike Muladhara, which is grounded in the earth. It's very solid, it's very fixed, it's very supported. Svadhisthana is more fluid and formless. And this is kind of where we kind of find a path of this movement in our lives. Movement with emotions, movement with wants, needs, desires, feelings, sensations. These are all things that are very fluid within our body, and that is really related to our Svadhisthana chakra. Water, without this idea of without water, growth is impossible. So we need this sense of fluidity in our life. We need that sense of grounding. We need that sense of support. We need that sense of stability. But we also need the sense of movement. Movement with our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own ideas, our own creativity. And that is really what also helps to shape us and our lives. And so as much as Muladhara is also the foundation, we also want to be able to have this level of fluidity in our life. But we come to that fluidity from a sense of balance and foundation. So we come from Muladhara, then we move into Svadhisthana. Muladhara is focused on fulfilling our basic needs, so we know that foundation, whereas Svadhisthana is also focused on pleasure, play. It promotes a sense of well-being, and it's trying to help us through play and through creativity as a way of healing. I recently finished the book by Brené Brown called The Power of Vulnerability. If you have not listened to any of Brené Brown's books or have read any of her books, I would highly encourage you to do that. She is a very, very influential sociologist who has done a lot of research in the realm of shame and vulnerability. And when I finished this book, or towards the end of the book, she talked about the importance of play. And how play is a really important aspect of our well-being. And as children, we often use play. We encourage children to play. We encourage children to have fun and to create and to do things that are different, to be fluid, to be able to move in different directions. But as adults, we tend to lose sight of that importance of play. And she talks about how it's often because we don't create the sense of value to play. There's not a monetary value to it. There is not this exchange of being creative and then getting something back from it, often in a relationship with regards to perhaps financial remuneration or maybe recognition. We don't do things just for the sake of doing them without any purpose. Imagine doing something without thinking about having an end goal for it. Is that something that you can experiment with? Can you try that out? Having the sense of play is really important to being able to invite the sense of creativity in our lives. And it also really helps to teach us to be open, to be able to invite change into our life, to be able to think about different things. And to really tune into our inner desires and really to what it is we enjoy. And a lot of times in our society, we talk so much about, or there's this sense that, we have to have the big job, we have to earn a lot of money, we have to have a career, we have to do all these things, which of course is an important aspect to living, to help support ourselves. But there's also an important aspect to play and to doing things without that end result of something having to be there to justify the reason for why we're doing this creative thing. And it's important that we check in with that idea of pleasure and being able to do things for the sake of just it being pleasant for ourselves. Tuning in to our feelings about that and how that helps also allow us to check in with ourselves. And if you think of times when you got so involved in a creative process, that time seems to disappear, because you're just so enthralled with what you're doing. You're so in tuned with that moment of just doing something you truly love. Now, there are moments we lose touch of that, and that's okay. That's part of the process of kind of experimenting and being fluid, and sometimes we fall in and we fall out of that creative process, and that is really okay. It's part of what we do. It's part of life. I can tell you many times I feel really fluid with my creativity. I feel really involved in it. I feel really engulfed in it. And then there are times when I'm dry as a bone and the thoughts aren't there, the creative ideas are not there, and it's like you kind of find yourself in this really kind of strange place. But that's okay. And that's also part of the process, to be able to check in and to see, maybe take a break and maybe to check in with ourselves and where are we at. And that's part of that fluidity. They talk about the idea of senses with this chakra. Now, we really check in with our senses here, our sense of touch, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, our sense of sight, our sense of smell, I think I got them all, hearing. So one of the things we do check in to be able to create the sense of feeling and checking in with our feeling is through sense. So we talk a lot about, and you may have heard this, really you've maybe heard this through, books you've read, or, really enjoying when you eat your food, taking each bite and really noticing that mouthful, not just eating it without the sense of connection, or walking outside and noticing the air, noticing the sun, noticing the moon, noticing the flowers in a garden, and really being in tune with your feelings and your senses when you are doing things, connecting. And in the book that I read, it talks about being open. When we open up to our senses, we become sensible rather than senseless. We really check in and tune into our feelings. Not senseless as in we're not, we have no senses or we're irresponsible, but senseless as in a sense that we're not connected to all of these different aspects. And that is really what yoga is. It is about connecting with your senses, connecting with your feelings, and being in tune with yourself. Through desire, emotion, and pleasure, we enter into a place where we can dissolve our boundaries. And I talked earlier about, being involved in a creative process where you just lose sight of time, you lose sight of sound, you can lose sight of whatever is around you because you're so focused on that one thing. And that is really a way to create this journey towards bliss and consciousness, really being able to be in that moment within yourself, to really check into what gives you a sense of, I don't want to say happiness, but the sense of connection. The sense of connection with yourself and creativity and being connected with all of these different senses and a movement through creative process or through awareness of your senses is a great way to do that. And through play, that is really a wonderful way to do that. Now, how do we deepen our connection with Svadhisthana? Well, first and foremost, Svadhisthana, like our Muladhara, can have some deficiencies and excesses as well. So, in as much as we can sometimes do too much of thing, we also can have not enough attention to our second chakra. Oftentimes, because of the area of this second chakra, there is, and the second chakra really relates to the hips, the abdomen, the low back, and the genital area. Because of this watery aspect of the second chakra, it also relates to anything water related within our body, such as the kidneys, the bladder, our urinary tract, as well as reproductive system. Persistent issues within this area, if you have kidney issues or you frequently experience urinary tract infections, could mean an imbalance in this chakra. So that's one area that maybe you might be aware of. Oh, I frequently get this type of situation. Okay, where am I imbalanced in other areas of my life? Am I not, I'm not saying this will solve it. Of course, there's a functional of having to go see a doctor if you've got something medically wrong with you. But it could be something that you might check in and say, hey, you know what? I haven't been taking care of myself. I've been working too hard. I haven't had enough time for play. What do I need to do to balance this chakra out? Other physical imbalances that might relate to this chakra might be low back pain, hip joint issues, bladder issues, menstrual issues, reproductive issues. How do we get ourselves back into balance with this second chakra? Well, one of the things is doing things that create some flexibility in our life. From a physical standpoint, perhaps going to a yoga class, perhaps taking some time to stretch at the end of a long day. Becoming more flexible with our attitudes, so thinking about that flexibility and that watery flow. Move with fluidity. Do you dance? Do you hike? Do you get your body moving in the day? Last week after our class, it was a gorgeous day outside, and I finished reading Brene Brown's book, and one of the things she said is she loves to dance in her house, and I do that all the time, but I don't do it enough. So I jacked up that music last week, and I was rocking it out in my house, and there was a sense of freedom. There was a sense of glorious bliss of just being free. I was doing it down here. Nobody was watching me. But even if somebody was, it didn't really matter because it felt good and it felt freeing. So do you do that enough for yourself? Do you do things that give you that sense of joy, that sense of being connected with how you're feeling and just this feeling of connected? Check into your senses. Notice the sounds around you. Notice the tastes, the touches, the flavors as you eat your food. And checking into your senses. Being in tune with that part too. Noticing that gut feeling. If something doesn't quite feel right, check in with that as well. Listen to your gut feeling. Oftentimes it is telling you something. So that's another way to just check in. Your emotions. It also tries to relate to your emotional flow. Take time to feel deeply, being aware of your emotions and your state of being. We've all been in a place where um, where we can't express ourselves, so we don't let our feelings out, or we hold it inside, and that can create a bit of frustration, but it can also tend to let us react in ways that has nothing real, react angrily, but we're reacting to something that doesn't have to do with the actual true feeling of why we're reacting to a situation. So I'll give you an example. I might get mad at my son because he didn't clean up his room, or he didn't do what I needed him to do. But my underlining frustration might have been related to something else earlier in the day. I might have been frustrated with somebody who said something to me that didn't feel quite good, and I let it out on my son over his room. Um, I'm sure we've all let it out on our kids over their rooms, but you know what I mean? Like, it might not be because of the room, it was just this frustration. So tuning into that, checking in, why are you bothered? What was it that that person said? And honoring that it's okay to feel that way. Many times in our lives, I'm sure we've also been told, oh, you're overreacting, or you're not being reasonable, and you're being told how you should feel. Well, that is also not allowing yourself and honoring yourself, that to check into how you're feeling, that you have the right to feel the way you feel, and you don't have to justify it to anybody else. And you don't have to necessarily accept what that person is saying to you. You have the right, if that bothers you, you have the right to be bothered by that. But you also have the right to check in and see how it feels, to let it go too. So being able to have that balance of respecting yourself, respecting the feelings that you're feeling, and listening to yourself, and not necessarily letting other people's opinions about tell you how you should feel. Sexuality. It is an area of our body, and we can't deny that this area does have this connection to sexuality. It is often related to the element of love and pleasure, and it helps get things moving, right? There's this flow of love when we are in an intimate relationship. Now ask yourself questions like, am I getting enough of that? Am I not necessarily the sexuality part, but sexuality can also mean love, attention, affection towards another person. Are you getting enough of pleasure of that in your life? Do you find a deep connection with your own needs and tuning into what you need as a person, as a human? Are you checking in that you're getting and satisfying those needs? As that's really important to check in with that part of yourself. Your emotional identity. Are you focusing on self-gratification? Is there a healthy emotional identity that helps you identify with your feelings and your experiences through, and can you work through them appropriately? So checking in, and I think I just said that, talking a little bit about, if you have a feeling, are you checking in with, if something happens to you, are you identifying that that's what bothered you and it wasn't in fact your son or your daughter's room that was messy, and checking in with what is upsetting you or making you feel good. I'm kind of erring on the side of negativity, but also checking in with what is it that happened in the day that made you feel good. Maybe somebody smiled at you a different way, or somebody pointed out that you were wearing a pretty hat or a nice shirt. How did that feel as well? Sometimes when we over-identify with our emotions, um, you may become ruled by them rather than informed by them. So there is also a balance as well, is to try to find a balance with being informed about your emotions, but not letting your emotions rule how you live your life. Because that can also it can also make you misinformation. Important signals that you might need to keep you safe. So if you're not necessarily if you're over checked in with your emotions, you might miss certain cues that you might need to keep yourself safe. So I am sorry, I'm saying this wrong. When you are the other way around, if you're over identified with your emotions, you'll end up being ruled by your emotions and not be able to have this ability to kind of just check in, see where you're at, and see that there's a balance. And on the inverse side, if you're under identified with your emotions, that's where you might not feel the cues of safety that your body's kind of signaling to you to keep you safe. Those inerrant cues, that gut feeling, if you're not checked in with your emotions. So there's really trying to find this balance between the two. And we talk about this basic right to feel. And that's really the foundational part of Svadhisthana, is this basic right to feel what you're feeling. To have experienced what you feel, to have this awareness of how experiences have made you feel in the past, maybe current situations that are happening. I know there's been a lot of emotions with regards to our election. It has drummed up a lot of emotions in a lot of people. Totally normal, and checking in with those feelings and having the right to feel what you're feeling. Despite being told, oh, let it go, don't let it bother you, things like that. And it's important that we honor and be honest with ourselves that, in fact, there are situations that are surrounding us right now that are very difficult, and we have the right to feel what we're feeling. You know, we talk about being told kind of to hold back on our feelings, or if we're overreacting. Men also, on the flip side, have this challenge as well. This is not certainly by any means, we don't corner the market on that. In our society, men are often told subliminally that they got to be strong, and they got to be tough, they got to hold in their emotions. Showing crying or emotions is a sign of weakness. Well, that's not healthy either, right? Like, we've got to find that balance and allow people around us to show their feelings, both men and women. So just as often as women are often cited as being too emotional, men are often kind of incited as being not. They shouldn't hold and express their emotions. They should be stronger and hold everything in. So it's really trying to find this balance between the two. And we can only discover that for ourselves, right? We can't ask someone, tell me how I feel. I need to check that in with myself, as you need to check that in with yourself. So we are going to, and the last thing I'm going to say about this is the biggest demon for the second chakra is guilt. And that's one thing we want to check in with ourselves. Are we feeling guilty about something? Is something not feeling good? That's really going to throw us off. And usually, if something's happened, it's because you didn't, maybe were unable at that moment to honor your feelings, and maybe you said something or did something that wasn't in check with really how you felt about a situation. And that is really one of the biggest demons of our second chakra, is the sense of guilt. And so that's something also, another kind of cue. If you are feeling a little bit guilty about something, check in. How are you feeling about it? How did you handle that situation? Maybe you need to honor your feelings, maybe approach that person, or kind of come back and try to make amends with the situation to kind of free that off and take that off your shoulders. So that's the second chakra. Now we're going to begin, because the element of this chakra is water, we are going to begin with an ocean's meditation. So I'd like everyone at this point now to, if you haven't already found a comfortable spot, I'd like you to go ahead and either sit up against a cushion or a chair. You can find yourself crisscross with your legs. And we're going to get ourselves nice and comfortable here. And I'm just going to make sure everybody's muted. And good. And maybe find your way in whatever position you want. So if you want to sit propped up on a pillow, if if you want to sit up on a chair, whatever works for you. Now let's begin by weaving our hands together and then placing your hands just at your lap and bringing your tips of your thumbs together. And let's close our eyes. And let's begin to lengthen our spine. And before we begin our meditation, I want us to come back to Muladhara for a moment. And I want you to imagine wherever you are right now, whether you're seated in a chair or on the floor, I want you to imagine your sits bones grounding deeply into the earth. And I want you to think of that plumb line coming in from the top of your crown, down your spine, down your tailbone, rooting into the earth crust, all the layers. And that plumb line is going to continue down to the core of the earth. And I want you to imagine that that line is wrapping itself around the center of the earth. And then it's going to make its way back up that same channel all the way through all the different layers of the earth, all the way up into your tailbone, all the way up the spine, and all the way out of the crown of the head. And I want you to imagine you've got your body grounded into the earth here, and just check in for a moment, see how you're feeling. And just begin to notice and connect to the rise and fall of your breath. Now I want you to imagine you are sitting in a small boat, a canoe perhaps. With each inhale that arrives, feel the sensation that you are floating on top of the water. And with each exhale, you are drifting further and further from the shore. Feel the vastness of the ocean below you and the possibility of the sky above you. Now, imagine that a wave rolls underneath you and rocks your boat. And then another wave arrives, and then another. Feel them come and go, holding within them life's ever-changing nature. Think of the many waves of your life. Some have lulled you with their gentleness, their consistency, and comfort. While others have been giant, dragged down tsunamis that you nearly drowned in. All have integrated into the great big ocean that makes up the tapestry of you. You are each wave, but you are also the entire ocean. Honor all that has brought you here. Ask yourself, do I give myself permission to feel the fullness of all my feelings in any given moment? Think of what you have stuffed inside or shoved away. What part of your emotional landscape is waiting to be acknowledged? And on the other hand, ask yourself, what parts of the past am I clinging to? What am I ready to let go of? Now from this place, I'd like you all to roll down onto your back. And we're going to find ourselves in Badaknasana into butterfly pose, into reclining butterfly pose. So lie down on your back and bring your soles of your feet together. Let your knees rest out to the side and feel free to go ahead and grab a pillow to rest underneath your knees. I'd like this to be very comfortable. And if Badaknasana does not feel good for you, then you can simply bend your knees and rest your feet flat on the floor. So butterfly pose, when we lie down on our back, we'll bring our soles of our feet together, and I'm just going to demonstrate real quickly so that everybody knows what pose we're talking about. With our feet together and our knees wide, and you can prop yourself with your knees with some pillows or blocks underneath your knees so that your knees are resting and they feel comfortable here. And once you've found your space, place your hands on your lower belly. And as you place your hands on your lower belly, begin to notice the rise and fall of your breath. And you may begin to feel the vulnerability of this pose. You may begin to feel your body's open expression and receptivity. And you may ask yourself, do I allow for pleasure in my life? And feel the space to listen. Take this moment just to listen to your body, to check in. Do you allow pleasure into your life? Joy, creativity. Do you dance? Do you swim? Do you maybe take a warm bath and light some candles and make yourself comfortable? You sometimes just sit and read just a book that has no necessarily any purpose of learning, but just for the sake of pure enjoyment. Do you occasionally get dressed up and put makeup on or wear your favorite outfit just because it feels good and makes you feel good inside? And this is a part that always needs to be tending. It's a part of our lives that we always are working for and working hard on. Trying to look to find the sweetness of life. To stop and smell the roses, as they say. And then walk on. May you feel into each of your feelings fully, and then surrender to them with flow. Take a moment here to take a deep breath into the belly and a deep exhale out of the mouth. And then slowly begin to raise your knees and bring them into a bent position, aligned with your feet and your hips. And we're going to rest the shoulders nice and flat onto the floor and rest our hands at our sides. And from here, we're just going to focus on our pelvis. So as you inhale, tilt your pelvis so that your hip bones are resting up towards the sun. You've got a big opening in your low back. And then as you exhale, tilt your pelvis so that your low back is flat. And your pelvis hip bones, the top of your hip bones are pressing down towards the earth. And just inhale and exhale, moving and tilting your pelvis forward and back. Loosening up that space. Tuning into our sacral chakra. And setting your intention for your practice today. And maybe your intention is centered around this idea of checking in with your feelings. Today I will feel. Today I will notice. And then as you're ready, bring your back to a neutral space where your hips are not reaching towards the sky and your hips are not reaching towards the earth. And bring your feet so that they are in line with your hips, and press your feet into the floor. Press the back of your arms into the floor. And as you inhale, lift your whole torso up towards the sky, opening up the front of your body, opening up your pelvis. And then slowly coming down and resting your pelvis down towards the earth. Noticing the power of the feet resting and grounding into the earth, and noticing the opening of the pelvis as you open up your front body and as you rest your back down towards the floor. Lifting with this idea of opening up your heart, opening up to a world of possibility, and fully expressing yourself and noticing your feelings, both emotionally, physically, spiritually. And then let us finish with one last lift. And lower down to the ground, resting your pelvis down onto the earth, opening your feet as wide as your mat, and then begin to sway your knees like an ocean's wave, moving and swaying your body. Fully expressing how you feel, allowing your body to flow. Beautiful. And then as you're ready, bring your knees back in through center. And we're going to bring both knees in towards our heart. And as you rest your spine down onto the ground, I want you to notice your sacrum, notice your pelvis. As you draw your knees in towards your heart, and then begin to flow with your body from side to side, thinking of water flowing in a bath, in the ocean, in a lake, in a stream, and how it just flows and moves into all the different crevices. Maybe experiment by moving your body in the different crevices of your body. Maybe moving your knees and experimenting with touching the whole base of your low back, the back of the shoulders, and just kind of flowing with the knees, flowing with your body and your shoulders. And then perhaps changing the tides, moving in a different direction. And take yourself back to a place where maybe you were 4 or 5 years old and you were told to lie on the floor with your knees in towards your chest, and playfully you began to move your body without a care in the world, and just this fine-tuned connection with your body and where it is right now. And honoring any emotions that may surface. Feeling into that space without judgment, without expectation, without labeling or questioning. Allowing those emotions to freely arise, as may be the case. Once in a while, these things just pop up and we don't know why, but allowing them to freely flow. And then at your own perfect pace, begin to bring your knees in through center and extend your legs up to the sky and open the heels towards the sun and point the toes. Allowing the ankles to flow from maybe side to side, just circulating and flowing. And then changing course and moving in another direction. Maybe you begin to notice some circular motions happening through the legs, and just playing around, finding that flow, finding that sense of play, of joyfulness, and maybe letting go any sort of expectation or end result. And then maybe reversing if your legs are moving, just allowing them to flow in another direction. Tapping into the seed of change. this opportunity for growth and connection to consciousness. And then perhaps releasing your feet down to the floor and rolling onto your side and coming into all fours. However you may get there, take your time. Coming back to this grounding sensation through the fingers and through the knees and through the top of the feet. Let us open our knees as wide as our hips, press our feet into the floor. And just like an ocean's wave, begin to move into our hip circles and allowing our shoulders to remain soft, allowing our hips to simply move, to open up the side of the body, to allow some organic movement through the shoulders, through the joints, breathing in and breathing out through the nose. And as you move here, maybe you're noticing your body, maybe you're hearing sounds, maybe you're noticing the touch of your hands against the floor. Perhaps you're noticing a taste in the mouth. Connect into your senses. And maybe you simply notice one thing. You need not tap into all at once. Maybe we sway our direction in the opposite way, and you notice something different when we change it up. You notice how the flow not only changes your direction, but it changes your perspective. It changes that connection to sense, that connection to self. It changes that relationship to play. Maybe one direction feels more pleasant than the other. And just being aware and conscious and awakened to those different aspects of one's life, one's relationships, of one's path. And acknowledging that just checking in can bring that awareness, can create further connection. And then as you're ready, bring yourself in through center and curl your toes under as we press into downward dog. And if we're not doing downward dog today, perhaps we're doing puppy. Perhaps our hips are up or our arms are extended. And if we're in downward dog, let us notice the 4-point connection and tap into our sense of touch here. Notice the sensation, maybe the connection or the rippling of the mat underneath your hands, maybe the texture, maybe even the temperature. Maybe you notice your hands pressing into the mat, creating a bit of an imprint. Perhaps you notice the ball of your feet pressing into the floor. And then from here, let us walk our hands towards our feet and find ourselves in our forward fold. Now, for some, coming into a full forward fold may not be accessible, so then I'd like you to consider a half fold. And we're going to notice our pelvic region here. Drawing awareness to the lifting of our belly button in towards our spine. Maybe we are also noticing the back of our body. Simply bend the knees if it feels too heavy. And then from here, we're going to begin to roll ourselves up, pulling in through the belly and pressing the feet into the floor and coming up into a standing position. Taking a breath as we sweep the arms up towards the sky. And then exhale, lengthen the arms out to the side, hinge from your pelvis, coming down into a forward fold. Bend in through the knees, sweep the arms back, come into your chair pose. Draw in through your Mula Bandha. Connect your feet into the floor, draw your navel space up, lengthen your spine. And then as you're ready, extend your body long and rest your hands to the side and find mountain pose. Drawing in that connection to your belly button as it draws up and in. Open up through the chest. As you're ready, sweep your arms forward, maybe finding about our hip, shoulder height, or extending the arms up overhead and taking a big step forward with our right foot. And we're going to come into Crescent Pose. And just before we begin to really settle in, I want you just to begin to settle and notice the space beneath you, focusing on the pelvis here. Noticing on the shape and the placement of the pelvis forward. Notice on maybe if you can draw your inner thighs together. Really center your attention in that area. As you ground in through the feet, thinking about Muladhara, coming back to that grounding, then draw your attention upward, bringing your inner thighs closer together. Notice that if this feels a little bit too much, you can come into a shorter stance, and you can also come down on that left knee if that feels better in a kneeling position. If it feels good, raise your hands. Now from here, I want you to drop your shoulders, tap into your Svadhisthana. And then from here, we're going to shift our weight to the long side of our mat and extend our arms out. Our legs are going to be slightly externally rotated. And then rest your hands at your hips. In preparation for Pasarita Padonasana, let us roll our shoulder blades back. Roll our shoulder blades back. And then we're going to hinge from our hips here. Now, before we do that, I want you to just make sure you've got your feet grounded. Your knees are tracking with your toes. So we want to make sure that your feet are not here and your knees are out, or your feet are here and your knees are in. So try to kind of externally rotate if your feet are out here. From here, place your hands at your hips, and then we're going to come forward, hinging from that Svadhisthana space. Finding our forward fold here. Let the crown of the head rest down if that feels comfortable. If we're taking care of our eyes or if we have blood pressure issues, maybe we're not releasing our head down past our heart. But I do want you to focus on this belly area here, the pelvic area. And then as you're ready, we'll walk our hands over to the opposite leg, bringing both feet forward, bringing the back foot, the right foot onto the ball, bending into that left knee and swimming the arms up. If it feels comfortable, coming into our crescent pose on the other side. Drawing that attention back to that inner thigh, squeezing together, pulling up from the earth all the way up, nice and tall. If we're taking care of our shoulders, maybe we're reaching our arms forward. And just notice how this feels. Tap into that sensation. Maybe you're noticing different parts are stretching, different parts are working. Can we pull up through the belly, kind of pull our upper body away from our pelvis? And then from here, come back to the long end of your mat. Rest your hands back at your hips, externally rotate your feet, and come into your forward fold. Either coming to a half forward fold or forward fold all the way down. Beautiful. And then from here, lengthen your spine. Inhale, sweep the arms up. Come into your 5-pointed star. And then from here, bring your hand to your hips. And I want you to take a moment here. Notice how this feels. A very strengthening superpower pose, right? Imagine every day you wake up honoring yourself and look at yourself in the mirror and you are strong. You are worthy and you have the right to feel. Open up your shoulders, open up your chest. Maybe interlace the fingers, lead with your heart down one more time, coming into a forward fold, hinging from the hips. And then as you're ready, release the hands down to the floor. Walk your hands over to that right foot. Bringing that right foot back and meeting in downward facing dog. Lifting up through the hips, dropping down through the shoulders. And then shift your weight forward, either coming into a full plank position or bending down onto your knees. Whatever feels good. And then as you're ready, we're going to come all the way down to the earth. Rolling the shoulder blades back, lifting up, keeping the pelvis down towards the earth as you pull yourself, opening up through the chest, opening up the front body. And then resting down and pressing back into child's pose. Toes together, knees wide, extend the arms out long, press down through the tailbone. Open up the back body. And then as you're ready, keeping your pelvis stuck in space, walk your hands over to the left side of the room, pressing down through your right hip bone, opening up the right side of the body. Notice how this feels. And then walking your hands in through center and walking your hands over to the right side. And then as you're ready, walk your hands back through center. Shift your weight over onto your knees. Keep your right hand down and underneath the shoulder as you kickstand your right leg underneath your hips, opening up the front body and opening up the pelvis. Maybe reaching with the right or left arm up over to the sun, opening up through the hips. And then bringing that left arm down, moving to the opposite leg. Left arm underneath the shoulder, right arm long, right leg long and right arm long, opening up through the hip. And then coming right back down to the earth. Coming onto your sits bones. Opening up into Badaknasana in the seated position. So butterfly pose in the seated position. Soles of the feet rest together as the knees widen. Now, if this feels like it's too much, you can always rest your feet a little further away from your center. You can extend one leg long and keep the other leg in if that feels better. So finding Badaknasana in our seated position, let the knees open up, let the pelvic area soften, and then feel free to cradle your feet with your hands and come into a forward fold. Focusing on letting go into the pelvis, into the hips and the low back. And take a few surrendering breaths here. Releasing any sensations, any emotions that might be tying you back. Surrendering just to yourself, to the authenticity of you. then as you're ready, coming back in through center, extend the right leg long, bringing the left foot in towards your center and turning towards the right lengthened leg. Now we're focusing on hinging from the pelvis. Guide the arms up overhead and rest the arms forward. Hands touch the toes, body rests forward. Nice long back, hinging from the hips. Try to soften in through the knee. Notice if you have your knee aligned with the rest of the leg and that one knee is not kind of curling in. And see if that left foot that's on the inner thigh of the right is kind of facing forward rather than sickling open, so the arch of the low of the foot is not opening up towards the sun. And then as you're ready, walk your hands in through center, lift your upper body, extend the left leg long and bring that right foot onto the inner thigh. Twisting towards the left, reaching the arms up overhead and coming into a forward fold. And same thing, keeping the knees aligned with the rest of the foot. The arch of the right is pressing into the inner thigh. And then as you're ready, walk your hands back through center. Extend both legs and wiggle them out. And just moving, letting go. Now from here, we're going to lie all the way down on our backs and we're going to go right into our Shavasana. Find a comfortable space. We're going to be there for approximately 2 minutes. I'm going to be taking a look at the time. We're running a few minutes over. So I will take a look at the time and I want you just to relax your body. So find whatever position feels comfortable for you. Rest your body. Rest your heart. And I want you to take time in to focus on breathing into the belly. And just take a moment to allow your body to rest here. Letting the back of your head feel soft. Sorry. Allow the back of your head to rest. Allow your throat space to open. Allow your pelvis to feel soft. Before we reawaken ourselves, I'd like you to take 3 deep breaths into the belly, into the pelvic region, and feel like the breath is leaving the pelvis, right, pressing down and releasing any air, any tension. And maybe begin to sway through the pelvis, side to side, up and down. Loosening up, maybe creating some circles on the pelvis. Now, if you're in Shavasana and you want to stay here a little longer, please feel free to do so. Maybe begin to move the fingers and the toes and gently sway the head from side to side. And at your own pace, we'll roll on to our favorite side. And take a few deep clearing breaths here, just transitioning. And then slowly press yourself up to seated. Meeting with our hands at heart center. Let us close our practice with a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let us take a moment to reflect upon our intention, reminding ourselves of the right to feel, the right to enjoy. May your heart always stay warm, and may your smile always stay broad, and may the light that shines in me always honor the light that shines in you. Namaste.